Welcome back to the If I Knew You Better podcast. My name is Brendan Davis. I'm your host, and pretty much every week I talk to somebody, typically from the world of entertainment, and I like to find out what makes them tick and what they have learned or can share with you that you will find useful or just enjoy. And this week's episode is full of both of those aspects of things. My guest this week is Steve Kaplan. Steve is, not to embarrass him, but he's a bit of a legend in comedy circles. His background is extensive. He has been everything from a writer to a theater owner and a producer, and he works primarily these days as a consultant about comedy and comedy writing specifically, and he hosts a 2-day comedy intensive seminar that he does around the world. This weekend, actually, he has his seminar in Burbank, here in the Los Angeles area, and I'm planning to attend, as long as I don't have any meetings that are a conflict. So if you're in LA and you are interested in this interview and you're hearing this in time, try to get on up there to the Burbank Marriott and check out Steve's seminar. And he has other events coming up on his schedule, including a seminar in New York. He also does a few remotely for other countries. You can visit his website. I will link this in the show notes, as well as links to Amazon to his 2 books, The Comic Hero's Journey and The Hidden Tools of Comedy, which are really, really useful if you write, do comedy, like comedy, or you just want to learn more about it. Without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Steve Kaplan. Well, I'm pleased to be joined today on the Skype machine from lovely Calabasas, California, Mr. Steve Kaplan. Steve, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. Actually, Calabasas is where Kobe's helicopter went down. I'm in Chatsworth.
Oh, why did I keep saying Calabasas?
I think 10 miles north of there.
That's right. Well, you're out of the crash zone, I guess.
I was not responsible, although we were all, kind of bummed out.
Sure. No, that was a big bummer. I remember that. Well, I have just introduced you a little bit here for the sake of people coming to this cold, but not to embarrass you, but you are a legend. You are a legend in the world of comedy. Could you please give me your own sort of potted bio? What's kind of the short introduction to yourself that you lay on people if need be?
I'm a Libra. My favorite is blue.
Nice.
I like long walks on the beach. As a very young, kind of arrogant kid, I started a theater company in New York with 2 other friends, 2 actors, and because at that time New York was full of self-important, self-indulgent artistes. You walk into a theater and you're watching production, the 4th production you've seen that week of the 3 Sisters, with all the actors wearing black turtlenecks and nice. And so when we started this theater, my 2 actor friends, they just wanted a place where they didn't have to audition, where they could just be in the show. But for me, I'd always been fascinated by comedy. As an aspiring / mediocre actor. And then I was a theater director. So I pitched them and I won them over to the idea of starting a theater that was completely devoted to comedy. And we called it Manhattan Punchline. And a lot of great people came out of there. We had, on the writer's side, Howard Corder, he's one of the EPs on, the Boardwalk, the HBO Boardwalk Empire. Mm-hmm. David Crane, who went on to do a little thing called Friends.
Yeah, heard of that one.
And a lot of great people, actors like Mercedes Ruehl and Oliver Platt and John Leguizamo and Nathan Lane. So we were there. We had a small theater company in Times Square, as my friend used to call it, just a knife's throw from the Port Authority.
Accurate at the time, no doubt.
And we lasted, through good creativity and artistic endeavors and very poor business management. We lasted about 13 years.
Wow.
Which is more than most convicted murderers get. And yeah, as I'm doing this, in the arrogance of youth, I thought I knew everything there was to know about comedy.
Sure.
I was directing, I was producing, I acted in one of the shows. I was in a sketch comedy group, and I realized after doing it for a little bit of time that okay, I didn't know everything there was to know about comedy, but I knew what wasn't funny. God damn it!
Right.
And then shortly after that, I thought to myself, how the fuck does this stuff work?
Mm-hmm.
Why is something funny on a Thursday no longer funny on a Sunday?
Right.
What's the difference between one audience that's laughing uproariously at the same material and another audience that's sitting there like a stone? And the actors used to come off, and because we had no money and we had no staff, I was there every night. The actors used to come off during a bad performance and say, "What a terrible audience."
Mm.
But I was in the audience, and
Yeah.
I wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I might not have laughed as though I never heard the joke, but I was willing to enjoy myself. But I noticed that there was something different that was happening, something the actors weren't aware of. And so I started to investigate it. What's going on that changes the performance from something that is making people laugh to something that is not making people laugh? And sometimes there's a guy who coughs at the funniest line and then it's gone. But oftentimes it was subtle, unconscious changes the actors were doing that was changing the dynamic. So I started to explore this I was teaching improv classes, I was teaching acting classes. And so out of that came this body of work that my friend Brad Bellamy once said, "You should write this down." Mm-hmm. And then 25 years later,
overnight success.
Because I'm a very slow writer. So the theater closes in I guess 1992, and I move out to Los Angeles. I go to see a friend who's working at a cable network. And I pitch him a project, and he buys it. And so I'm in Los Angeles, and a guy comes up to me and says, you could do. I remember you from New York, and you could do for comedy what Robert McKee does for story. And I said, well, because I taught acting classes, and I tried to teach acting classes in L.A. But I noticed one very important thing about teaching an acting class in LA.
Yeah.
Actors have no money.
True. Generally true.
And you can't get them back for a 4-week workshop, for a 4-week class, because on week 2 the sun is out.
There you go.
And so they're off. So it was kind of frustrating trying to do that. And also, they don't want to just learn about comedy. If they're stand-ups, they're going to take a stand-up class. If they're improvs, there's great improv classes and theaters around L.A. So this guy said, you could do for writers. And I thought to myself, I've worked with a lot of writers, at Manhattan Punchline. So I thought, okay. And we started in 2004 in a very, we had a very small group in a very small theater, and it just mushroomed or snowballed or whatever kind of metaphor you want to.
Expansive, nature-related metaphor we want to use. Yeah.
I shortly thereafter was brought out to Singapore, London, Australia, and so over the last, 15, 16 years, I've been around the world several times. I just came back last year. I was in Bombay, Mumbai, actually, Rio, Kiev, and Moscow.
Wow.
As well as Los Angeles.
Comedy hotspots, all really. Yeah.
I'm doing distance classes in Sweden and Kiev. And along the way, I looked back at all this material, and I remembered what my friend said, and he said, you should write a book. But I'm I'm a director. I'm a terrible writer because I write a sentence. I don't. Are you a writer?
I am in theory, yes.
Okay, in theory. But so maybe you share some of the same psychology. I write a sentence, and I either think, "Oh, that's the worst sentence in the world. I have to get rid of it," or I write a sentence, and then I think to myself, "That's so stupid. Everybody knows that." And so I was stuck on sentence one.
Right.
And then I realized, what is my gift as a director and dramaturg? It's working on existing material and helping to reshape it and often pitch new lines and rewrite it. And I thought, I'm going to do that to myself.
Okay.
So I taped a number of different workshops. I sent the tapes out to Kentucky to this wonderful woman who transcribed them all. She sent it back to me. And then I read it. I said, boy, this guy, he's got some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And I was able to write the two books based upon just not writing, but rewriting.
That's fantastic. Using your own transcriptions. And of course, this is sort of a lost art in a way, but there are a lot of, there are many people, there are many famous authors people revere in serious literature and other genres where that's their process, as they actually dictate, whether a dictaphone or some other version of that process. And then someone does the laborious part of matching the spoken with the written, and then you can see it and work with it. And
I could go, oh, that's perfect. I need to change that. Yeah. So you asked me for my short bio, and that is as short as I can make it.
That's pretty good though. And
then today I had cereal.
Okay. All right.
Now we're up to date.
Nice. And I had a nice coffee and we're ready to go. So, sometimes the tags aren't funny. That was an example of, it's okay. I know who I'm talking to here. In terms of your books, now chicken and egg this for me, because I have both and I have enjoyed both, but I have not actually looked at the publication date. The Comic Hero's Journey and the Hidden Tools of Comedy, published by our friends at Michael Weesey Productions. Plug. But which was the chicken and which was the egg, or which came first? Because
Hidden Tools of Comedy.
Hidden Tools of Comedy was first.
That was basically the stuff that I had started back in New York, trying to figure out what is not being taught, what is different that is not taught in colleges and conservatories. What are the 6 or 8 discrete tools that, if people knew about, could be utilized towards making performances and scripts more comic. So the hidden tools came first. And the tools are winning, non-hero, metaphorical relationship, straight line, wavy line, active emotion. So these were all things that, in trying to think, because, I went to college, I took acting classes, trying to think, okay, they taught me XYZ in the acting class, based upon some version of Stanislavski and Actor Studio and whatever else was new and current at the time. I thought, what was left out of there? What understanding or perception about how comedy works could I add to? So that's what that book is basically about.
Is there a central thesis that you either started with or that you start with now when you begin to break this down for someone? Because, people are used to thinking in terms of, I think, dramatic storytelling, and there's certain tropes and certain kind of ways into that are just well worn, and most people have it tattooed in their eyeballs if they've taken those kind of courses. But how do you sort of begin with comedy? How do you begin to teach this thing that is so ephemeral and supposedly hard to teach?
We start with the idea that there's a difference between what's funny and what's comic. Funny is what makes you laugh. If you're laughing at it, to you, it's funny.
Right.
Period. End of story. But on the other hand, if you're not laughing at it, no matter how great a review on NPR, they're saying it's the comedy hit of the century.
Mm-hmm.
If you're laughing at it, to you, it's not funny.
Right.
So what are you supposed to do? You go to the movie theater and you're sitting there, you're laughing. Somebody sitting next to you goes, "That's not funny." What are you supposed to do? Go slap yourself on the forehead and go, "You're right. I was so wrong." There's a difference between funny and comic. I mean, I can make a baby. I have a little niece, and when she was a baby, I could go like this. I could shake the keys at her, and she would laugh. So does that mean if I shake keys, I can get a deal at Netflix? Well, probably Netflix, yes.
Maybe so. I'm going to try that.
But laughter, just making somebody laugh, is not the end result or even the objective of comedy, performance comedy. Performance comedy is about an ordinary guy or gal. Jackie Gleason used to call him a moke, struggling against insurmountable odds without many of the required skills and tools with which to win, yet never giving up hope. So if you look at that equation, that paradigm covers about 98% of all performance comedy. Mm-hmm. It's about somebody who's not perfect, who's less than, struggling with a hard problem that they don't have the skills to solve, and yet not giving up and giving it their best shot.
Yeah.
And so from this equation, we can start to draw usable practical tools. The tool of winning. Comedy gives you the permission to win. In a drama, if somebody gives the protagonist a hard time, the protagonist can either sulk or he can strike out, or whatever the protagonist does will be logical, rational, and justified. Mm-hmm. In comedy, you don't need to justify it. Comedy gives you the permission to do what you need to do to win, whatever winning it means to that character. So in Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's the character Phil Connor's living the same day over and over again, and every day on his way to work, on his way to do the remote on the Groundhog Day celebration, he's met by this really obnoxious insurance guy played by Stephen Tobolowsky, and the first time he kind of suffers through it. He does say some nasty things to him. I could stay here all day, but I'm not going to, he says, and he walks away. On day 2, he just says, what's happening? It's happening again. He pushes the guy away. On day 3, when he's absolutely sure it's happening, and he's already realized, because he's discussed this with these 2 drunks, that if there's no tomorrow, that means there's no consequences. Mm-hmm. You can do whatever you want to do. So he comes in, he walks down the street. Stephen Tobolowsky runs to him and says, Ned, and says, Phil Connors.
Ned Ryerson?
And he goes, Ned Ryerson, and he just punches him in the nose. And that's a huge laugh from the audience. Because we're laughing at somebody punching somebody in the nose? No, because he's given himself the permission to do what he needs to do in order to win. And in his mind, there's no consequences.
Yeah.
In Annie Hall, Woody Allen finds himself on a movie line arguing with a guy. And the guy says, I teach in Columbia, and I think I know a lot more about movies and the art of cinema than you do. And then Woody Allen says, well, I happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. And he pulls Marshall McLuhan
right.
over the poster to win his argument. Then he looks at, and then he talks to us directly into the camera. He says, if life were only like that. Comedy gives Woody Allen the permission to pull Marshall McLuhan out from behind a poster. It gives you the permission to win. But, dramatic heroes win, right? Mm-hmm. Bruce Willis, in Die Hard, he fights all the bad guys with his feet bloody from broken glass.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we talk about is non-hero. that your protagonist is a non-hero, not a ridiculous guy like a late Jerry Lewis movie,
Right.
but simply somebody who lacks some, if not all, the required skills and tools with which to win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, when I was growing up, you look like a younger guy, but when maybe you remember him. When I was growing up, a great action hero was Charles Bronson.
Sure,
right? Charles
sure.
Bronson
The Mechanic is one of my favorite. Jan Michael Vincent. Yeah, that was a classic 70s badass movie.
Exactly. So put Charles Bronson in a room with 12 guys with guns. Who wins?
Yeah, Charles Bronson. I mean,
why?
Yeah, because he's Charles Bronson.
Well, he doesn't have a name tag that says, "Hi, I'm Charles Bronson."
Exactly.
He's got skills.
Yes.
He's the best shot. He's the best tactician. He knows weapons. He knows strategies. He's able to withstand pain. You shoot him in the forehead, he just slaps a Band-Aid on and keeps on going. He shoots a bad guy in the shoulder. That guy's out for the fight.
Right.
He's got all the skills necessary to win.
Yeah.
Put Ben Stiller or Woody Allen in a room with 12 guys with guns. What happens?
Yeah, not the same result.
You're already smiling. You're already chuckling to yourself. I haven't written one word of dialogue. All I've done is put a comic character in an impossible situation. And you can just imagine Woody Allen goes, don't shoot me. I'm a bleeder. It'll ruin the rug. I mean, they'll try to figure out some way to get over, even if they can't.
Yeah.
So the combination of a non-hero giving him the permission to win creates comedy.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we start with the fact that the worst thing you could try to do is try to be funny.
Mm.
I mean, you shouldn't try to not be funny, but if you think about it, most bad sitcoms, most bad movies, comic movies, suffer from the fact that they're desperately trying to make you laugh,
right,
as opposed to getting you involved with the character and the story and the theme. One of the things we say is that it's about character, not about jokes. No one is rooting for the joke to get the girl.
Right. All right. That's a great point. That's a really great point. And you started this explanation by identifying the classic sort of relatable underdog archetype of a character. Right. And so if we can see ourselves or our weaknesses, at least, in that person, we're instantly rooting for them to get over no matter what the situation is.
And it doesn't have to be the relatable underdog. It could be the wise asshole, which Murray has specialized in. It's just somebody who's not perfect.
Yeah.
I show a lot of clips during the workshop. One of the first clips I show is from an old 1980 soap opera. And I show that just to show that these are a bunch of people who are dedicated to creating a dramatic moment. I mean, even if you think it's ridiculous and laughable, everybody's focused on creating a dramatic moment. So the choices they make are very important. And the choices they make are always to have their characters be, if not heroic or tragic, at least logical, rational, and appropriate. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I point out is that logical and rational and appropriate is the lie. Mm-hmm. We don't live logical, rational, and appropriate lives. We know in our heart of hearts how effing crazy we are.
Yeah.
We have our routines and our rituals, and we alphabetize all our books according to first name or whatever crazy thing we do that we don't tell people about at first glance because we don't want them to think we're crazy or messed up.
We don't want them to know
that we're crazy.
We don't want them to know.
Don't want them to know. I mean, on a first date, you don't open up the door and say, "Hey, let me tell you everything about myself."
Exactly.
You're hoping they get to like you first, and then you can tell them a little bit about. Well, I like to separate the green peas from the white corn, and
Yeah.
So one of the things we say is that drama helps us dream about what we could be. Would that I were that as brave and as resourceful as Bruce Willis in Die Hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Comedy helps us dream about what we could be. Would that I were as clever and as charming and as good looking as Hugh Grant and had that great hair.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could be that guy. Drama helps us dream about what we could be, but comedy helps us live with who we are.
Mm. How do you structure? We'll kind of bounce around a bit because I think it's all sort of interrelated. But with your 2-day seminars, and actually my old friend who I haven't caught up with in forever, actually blurbs your books, Dove Simmons, is famous for like his 2-day filmmaking seminar. And I know that in that he sort of does like a high level overview. Okay, here's the process. And then you start tackling kind of sequentially, because making a film is kind of a sequential process. How do you sort of structure at a meta level your 2-day weekend?
I love Dove, by the way.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I brought Dove to China, actually. I brought Dove to China 5-6 years ago for a thing, for him to do his thing, but in China. Yeah.
And one of the things I love about Dove is he basically says, here's what you do, and now screw the writer. Don't pay the writer.
Yeah, he's got a very particular point or two to share with the audience.
Yes. Okay, so my structure is we start with the hidden tools of comedy. Mm-hmm. We talk about what comedy is, how it works, why it works, most importantly, what's happening when it doesn't work, and how can you fix it?
Okay.
So one of the things that I do in my seminar that I don't think a lot of people do, I mean, I love Michael Haig. Mm-hmm. I love Robert McKee, of course, is a giant in the field. They show clips from fabulous movies, and you look at that. You look at Casablanca, and he breaks it down for you, and you go, "Wow, yeah, wow, okay. How am I going to write Casablanca? I'm still trying to get through Act 1 of this." My talking car movie,
right?
And I show you clips from movies that don't work.
Okay.
And I explain what's going wrong, and then I explain what could they have done to make it better.
Okay. Is there an example that translates to audio only? Is there something that you can think of that's I mean, I get the premise. I'm just curious to learn here.
Okay. Just think of a bad sitcom, mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
In which the laugh track has been turned up 1,000,000 degrees.
Sure.
What's your first reaction?
Yeah, well, they're trying too hard. They're trying to convince me to laugh, and it's not funny.
And maybe that weak joke might have made me chuckle.
Exactly.
Right?
And a chuckle could have been okay, but they try to insist that they're pushing it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I would have loved the chuckle.
Because that could have set up a bigger laugh later. There could have been a callback that would have been perfectly timed, and then it's hilarious,
I could have just enjoyed it at its own level.
Right.
But here they're telling me, no, it's hysterical. I'm going, no, it's not.
Right.
So one of the things is trying too hard to be funny. The idea that you need 3 jokes per page in a sitcom is the person who tells you to do that is a person who's never been a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. I took for fun, I won't say the name, and actually the course was great. I'm just not saying it because I don't want to get controversial, but very well regarded LA-based acting maven teacher, and I took a comedy intensive over a period of some weeknights, and it was great. But part of what we worked on, and I'm a writer producer, but I took it just I figured it's always helpful to learn and study any modality related, and what we workshopped, and I later saw the brilliance in this, but we used to workshop were not just sides from sitcoms, but bad sides. And the object lesson that I guess I'm trying to get to is simply that the goal was, okay, why doesn't this work? And that wasn't revealed at first. It was like, these are from a comedy writer and blah, blah, blah. And these were things maybe from pilots that didn't go from famous people. Right. And so you're thinking, wow, it's from the people who brought us this and that and so, and this should be great. And what's wrong? I don't get it. And so dissecting it in that way, where there's like the formulaic, and it came down to, yes, this is so formulaic that there's no surprise.
Right.
You absolutely expect wacky guy says, non sequitur, straight girl responds as she would. And then his response is supposed to be the kill us all, fall over in your seats laugh line, but it's just it's far too forced. And so adhering to these tropes is a double-edged sword, I think.
The other problem with wacky guy says something, straight girl says some straight line, and then wacky guy says the thing that makes everybody laugh, is that's the wrong understanding of the dynamic of a comedy duo.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The idea that there's a funny guy and a straight guy is incorrect.
Yeah.
It's that's, and one of the things when we teach the hidden tools, we teach these 6 or 8 tools first, and then we see how they apply to text. So the first day is kind of the foundation, and then the second day is we show how these tools can be applied to creating a feature film or sitcom. So that's where the second book came out of, because I really wanted to write a book on story structure for a comic film. And again, not to reinvent the wheel, but where is the difference? And that's why I studied Chris Vogler's writer's journey, because I wanted to write the comic hero's journey, because not that the writer's journey is wrong, but where are the important differences when working on a feature and working on a dramatic feature and working on a comic feature. But going back to the idea of straight line, wavy line.
Yeah.
John Cleese once said that when they started Monty Python, they thought that comedy was watching somebody do something silly. They came to realize that comedy is watching somebody watch somebody do something silly. Oh. It's not about, I'm a crazy guy and you're just giving me setup lines and then I'd be crazy. It's really about the normal person is the person that 9 times out of 10 is the person in that moment that we're empathizing with, the person with the problem.
Sure.
If you're in a room with Kramer's just an idiot. I'm empathizing with the person who has to deal with Kramer because Kramer's an idiot.
Exactly.
So it's the person struggling with the problem and the person creating the problem, as opposed to I'm the funny guy, you're not the funny, you're the straight person. Because that dynamic can shift from moment to moment, beat to beat.
Totally.
Because it depends on who's in focus. It depends on who the story is about at that moment. So I show a clip from Abbott and Costello, who's on first. And everybody thinks, I say, one of these characters is blind and the other character sees. And everybody thinks at first that it's the Bud Abbott, who's the kind of the straight man. He's the one who sees because he says, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. And Costello, being the funny guy, he goes, wait, he messes it all up. But then if you look at it, you see that Bud Abbott is blind to Costello's confusion.
Exactly.
Because
that's where the comedy is.
If Costello said, so what's the name of the guy on first? After a time, if Abbott was really paying attention, he would say, oh, I see what your problem is. Yeah. No. It's a weird guy's name. It's Sam Watt. He's on second base. Tommy Who is on first base. So in order for the bit to work, one of the characters, in this case, Bud Abbott, has to be blind to the situation. Whereas Costello, even though he's the stupid, funny one, he sees, because after a bit, he learns about third base.
Yeah.
What's the name of the? I don't know. He's on third base, and after a time, Bud Abbott goes, I don't know, third base. Third base.
Right.
He sees it. He just doesn't, because he's a non-hero. He just doesn't have the ability to put it all together all at once.
Yeah.
So the idea that comedy is about the funny person, again, it's all about funny, is incorrect. Comedy is about an ordinary, less than ordinary person struggling with an insurmountable odd. And sometimes that insurmountable odd is an insane person.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, someone you can't get away from Kramer.
Right.
Totally.
And that can switch. So that's one of the things that we talk about. That I used to have a friend who was on a sitcom, and I won't mention names. Grace Under Fire. Mm-hmm. And she was playing a recurring role on this unnamed sitcom, Grace Under Fire, starring Brett.
Sure.
And I would occasionally go to a
do a taping,
to a taping. But what was happening would be the writers, who were all dedicated, talented comedy writers, they would write a script. On Monday, they would do a table read, and some of the funny lines, some of the laugh lines, were not Brett's. But Brett's one of the producers. So after the table read on Monday, she demanded that those funny lines be given to her. So by Wednesday, she was saying all the funny lines.
Yeah.
But it made no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And on Friday, you would see this. It would be like a Picasso painting. Nothing made sense. She would just be blurting out these weird things because there was no character, no build-up, no setup.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at a brilliant sitcom, and I think one of the most brilliant, traditional but brilliant sitcoms is Everybody Loves Raymond.
Sure.
Ray Romano would go to the writer's room and make them take dialogue away. No kidding. So he could spend more time because one of my students later went on to become executive producer of Everybody Loves Raymond, Steve Skrovan. And Steve would tell me that he would come into the writer's room and say, take that away. Oh, give that line to somebody else. Let me be the reactor. Right. I'm the person who's dealing with it, who's struggling with it, as opposed to I'm going to say every funny line there is.
Right. Well, that's a nice counterpoint to the healthy, well-adjusted example of unnamed show Grace Under Fire starring Brett Butler.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to mention that.
No, but it'd be gauche to mention the name Grace Under Fire, but yeah. And sometimes a bit runs out, and that's what just happened. But that's my special gift, is killing the comedic bit. I'm going to put that on my resume under special skills, Steve.
So that's what we do. We look at comedy, we break it down, we analyze it. It is possible to analyze it. It is possible to figure out what we could do wrong. I show a clip from a Dan Aykroyd sitcom called Soul Man, which was a spinoff from Home Improvement. Mm-hmm. And we look at the first two scenes of an episode, and then we talk about
why it was canceled.
What errors are they making?
Yeah.
But you see, it's easy to throw darts at somebody.
Yeah, that was a cheap shot.
No. But the important thing is, what could they have done different?
Sure. And what could they have done differently?
Well,
without getting too granular, we don't have the clip in front of us, et cetera.
Listen, but I want to preface this by saying I love Dan Aykroyd. Sure. He's a genius. He's I'm totally he's a legend.
Yes.
With one legend.
All the above. Other. Yes.
In the episode that we saw, he had a comeback and a funny response to everything that happened.
Okay. Yeah.
As opposed to not having a funny response. Early in the episode, his little kid says, you called me mean. You said nobody's supposed to call people mean. Well, when you call people mean, then you're being mean. Well, then you're being mean, and back and forth and back and forth. And then the line was, "Don't do this to me this morning, Andy, please," which is kind of Bergman-esque for the first 13 seconds of a sitcom.
Yeah.
And I point, and one of the tools we talk about is positive action. Positive action is the idea that everything your character does, your character thinks it's going to work. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother doing it.
Right.
They don't know that there's a page and a half of dialogue to this fight. They think this very next thing I'm going to say will solve it and get to what I want. What my friend Brad Bellamy used to call protecting the possibility of a happy ending. So I then have a writing exercise. Give this guy a positive action. What could he say to the kid but then you're being mean. They're not, what could you say?
Right.
I mean, they come up with everything from, here's $10, buy yourself something pretty, to punch him in the nose and saying, now I'm being mean. Clearly would work for a traditional sitcom, but it would work if it was Family Guy, say.
Exactly.
So you can take a look at something and then there's fixes if you understand and utilize these tools, which are tools, but not rules.
Right.
Tools. I mean, there's a million ways to skin a cat. If something's not working, you have to take a look and say, am I being truthful enough about this character? Right. A lot of it is simply, they're not being truthful about the character. I mean, people are funny. They're ridiculous. They're all sorts of adjectives you can think of. They're reprehensible. They're ludicrous. They're who they are. Just think about your family at Thanksgiving or Christmas. You make fun when you get together with your cousins. You make fun of them. You make fun of your uncles and aunts and moms and dads. These people didn't study at the actor studio to be funny. They just are funny.
Right.
If you tell the truth about people, you're going to have comedy.
What is sort of in terms of the 2-day specifically, what is sort of what do you build toward? What are sort of the things that you've laid out to lay down these hidden tools and sort of shine a light on where they exist and things people are familiar with, and therefore you can sort of keep the lesson.
So day one, we work on the hidden tools. Day two, we talk about, how do you then use them to create a comic story? So then we talk about comic premise, the lie that tells the truth. And then they work on their comic premise. They come up with a comic premise, and then we talk about using the comic hero's journey. How would you then story out the premise? Where would you go? And so one of the things that's very important that I think is not really considered as much as it should be is the importance of theme in comedy.
Okay.
Just doing a series of jokes like Scary Movie.
Yeah. Like
Airplane. Then every joke has to kill. Right. Because you've got nothing left. You've only got your jokes. So if you look at Airplane at least had us following the story of this ridiculous guy played by Robert Hayes and his relationship with the stewardess, so that even though some bits work better than others, you still followed that story. Right. But if you look at Scary Movie 4, those characters are cardboard interchangeable, and you could care less about what happens to them. So who cares if there's a monster going to kill them? They're not real anyway.
Yeah.
So that you're then left with, how funny is this bit? And if the bits aren't funny, you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've got an hour and 10 minutes left to this an hour 30 movie, and you're in tough shape. So what they lead to at the end of it is By the end, they have a roadmap to how would you take an idea, how would you shape the idea? Because when we do this comic premise exercise, we have people work in groups and we come up with about 20 comic premises. Then we go around the room and we talk about each one, not good or bad, but here's the problems with this one. Mm-hmm. Here's the pitfall. Here's the potential. We'll talk about, let's see, a group a couple of months ago came up with, actually a couple of years ago, came up with Bin Laden is killed and thrown off of a helicopter, but then washes up into a town, and the town has to deal with him. And I said, okay, so what?
Yeah.
So what premise is you still have all the invention to do.
Sure.
The power of a great comic premise is it starts to write the movie for you.
Exactly.
If you have a great situation, you're already writing the movie in your head. You're coming up with scenes in your head. So a so what premise, yeah, you could make it work. It's just a lot harder because it's still execution contingent. It's still invention from page one. You still have to come up. Why would that be funny? Okay, I could see it.
It's probably even harder because versus say Groundhog Day, where I mean the bits are kind of endless that you think of. If you had to do a sequel to Groundhog Day, okay, what other things would he have to learn, master? I mean, they covered it well enough in the original, but with Bin Laden shows up in your backyard, it's like, okay, well, how do we begin to? But it's a comedy. How do we begin to?
Well, I guess the town will make him. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that in working on the comic premise, I'll give them an example. I'll say, okay, here's something that a group came up with. A college football team discovers that the only time that they can win is when they get the nerd laid.
Right.
Okay. So what scenes come to mind?
Well, I mean, the nerd and the nerd and the hot cheerleader.
Okay. What else?
Trying to do it without the nerd.
And then, and so there's a losing montage.
Test the idea, and they have the
so if there's a
galactic loser, yeah.
If there's a losing montage, there has to be a
winning montage.
So what else?
Oh my gosh. Well, the nerd discovers he has a talent in some position randomly, and he becomes part of the team.
Oh, I like that. What else?
Oh, the cheerleader discovers feelings for the nerd, and then you realize it only works if he has anonymous casual sex, and so he can't commit. You
see, here's the thing. This is a terrible idea.
We're learning more about me than your premise.
No. I wouldn't want to watch this movie. I wouldn't want to watch it on a plane. I believe. But within 5 minutes, we've come up with a third of the scenes that could be in the movie.
Exactly. Yeah. We know what we have to flesh out.
The premise is, for you, the more the scenes just happen in your imagination. It's still a tool. It's not as opposed to thinking of your log line as your selling tool. It's a writing tool. Your comic premise is a writing tool that helps power your imagination into the narrative. And now you may, you're in Act 2 and now you get a little lost. What should I do? But that's the difference between premise and development.
Right.
Premise could go a million different ways. If I was talking to 20 people and I gave them that premise, there could be 20 different ways of developing it.
Yeah, totally.
We also talk about archetypical characters. So that rather than thinking about stereotypical characters, or I'm not going to do stereotypes, I'm going to have this 4-page biography for every character. We have to recognize that there are archetypes, and we're foolish if we don't make use of them. For instance, in our football movie, we have the nerd. Who else do we have?
Well, we've got the Mr. America quarterback.
We have
Mr. Perfection.
Nerd, quarterback. Quarterback has two friends. Who are they?
Oh, quarterback has two friends. Well, he has his right hand guy.
Okay, and who is he? What position does he play on the team?
He's the running back.
Okay,
this is the go-to guy. This is the supporting ally. This is the ally. He can count on give the ball to Jimmy. Jimmy's going to get it across.
So if one friend is the running back, the little quick running back, who's his other friend?
His main blocker, the guy that protects him and keeps him from getting killed.
Right, the main blocker. Yeah. Okay. Who else should be in the movie?
Well, there's the female nerd who secretly loves the male nerd, but he doesn't see her because he's got the attention of the pretty cheerleader. No, she would love to be a cheerleader, but she's not a cheerleader.
So we have a cheerleader. Then you have the cheerleader's best friend, who's kind of nerdish.
Yeah, right.
Okay, who? Maybe you have a coach.
Sure. Yeah, there's a coach.
Okay, how is the cheerleader connected to the coach?
Well, that could be his daughter, of course.
Okay, because one of the things that we learn from the history of comedy, which we talk about in day 2, is the fact that comedy comes from a small unified universe.
Right.
So that in a Molière play, the old guy who's wandering around the streets of Paris in Act 1 always turns out to be the uncle of the 2 orphans in Act 5.
Right. So no one gets away. Everybody's really closely connected.
So wait a second. I have nerd, quarterback, running back, linebacker, cheerleader, coach. Nerd is Steve Carell. Quarterback is Paul Rudd. Running back is Romany Malco. The big lineman is Seth Rogen. Cheerleader is young Catherine Keener, and coach is Jane Lynch. You've just given me the cast of 40-Year-Old Virgin.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because these relationships appear and reappear and reappear.
Right.
And if you're busting a gut to be original, what no one has ever done before. Michael Haig has a great line. He says, when people say, I'm doing something that's never been done before, he says, well, maybe there's a reason for that.
Right. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
So we talk about character. We talk about how archetype. We talk about the fact that comedy, at least in the West, came out of an actor-centric tradition, that it's about the drama comes out of a writer's tradition.
Right.
The writers tell a story, make a point or teach a moral. In comedy, it's about the actor and the actor's relationship to each other and the actor's relationship to the audience. And then we show them how to come up with a comic premise. Then we show them how to develop that comic premise. So at the end of it, they've got a pretty good idea of where they would want to go if they took an idea and then tried to fashion it as a screenplay or a sitcom.
Nice. Well, I want to shift gears because I've had you for a long time and there's so much I want to talk about. I want to definitely fit this in before I have to let you continue on your mission of peace and goodwill. In terms of, you mentioned you do a lot of consulting, and of course, I'm sure you meet a lot of people through your seminars or, feedback from your books who are also working on creating the new thing. What do you think as you sort of look ahead down the road and, current situation is what it is in the world. And, as you think about where comedy's going in the next, short to medium term. So kind of a little crystal ball question. Where do you think things are going, perhaps in terms of the big picture themes, tropes, certain things crumbling, certain things holding firm? I'm just curious what you think about, or maybe things that people come to you and, people have their considerations about such things.
You know what I think? I think that the strict line between comedy and drama are eroding, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope so, because that's kind of the things that I'm working on myself development wise are definitely a blend of the two. I mean,
one of my favorite sitcoms right now is Kidding on with Jim Carrey on Showtime, and it's the saddest sitcom I think of, but it's brilliant. It's simply brilliant.
I've heard it's great. I've been, from being in China and being traveling, I haven't caught up with it, but that's on my list. Everybody's been telling me to watch this.
I believe that comedy tells the truth, and specifically, it tells the truth about people, which means that comedy, like the comedy in Parasite, is the best vehicle to tell stories. Yeah. That if you have a story that has no humor in it, it's not truthful. Mm-hmm. It could be moving, it could be very successful, but it lacks truth. For me, and I'm going to quote myself now in my book, comedy encompasses both our humanity and its inherent sins, our ridiculous lives and its deep sorrows, without rejecting either.
Wow.
Because comedy tells the stories of our lives, which is both ridiculous and tragic, both wonderful, gloriously wonderful, and full of pain. Yeah. Because without pain, there can be no comedy.
Well, where can people see you doing your show? Because we're actually releasing this the day before your upcoming Los Angeles seminar, I do believe.
If you're listening to this and you've got a weekend free, we will not be shaking hands. We'll be using a fist bump or elbow. But we're in Los Angeles on March 7th and 8th, and we're in London on April 25th and 26th, and New York September 12th and 13th. And you can find out information. You can register at our website, which is Kaplan, Kaplan, comedy, comedy, kaplancomedy.com. Or you could email me with your comedy questions at steve@kaplancomedy.com.
Very nice.
Or you can buy my book.
Yes.
Tools of Comedy and The Comic Hero's Journey, both available, on my website, but also, listen, quite frankly, it's cheaper on Amazon.
There you go.
But if you want an autographed copy, you can get it through me, or you can get it through Amazon. And Amazon, they're also both on Kindle, so if you could read it on your reader.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Steve, this has really been a pleasure for me, and I'd love to do a follow-up with you a little bit further down the track when we can get into yet another series of items related to this.
I would love that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right, thanks for listening this week. Don't forget that the links are in the show notes to the books and Steve's website that we spoke about in here. You can visit me online on pretty much any of the social medias. You can also share this podcast as you like. Please introduce this to a friend if you're enjoying the show. And if you would like to be a guest, or you know someone amazing you think I should interview, please let me know. I have no shortage of people who would like to be on this show, but scheduling is always a challenge. And as I did with Steve, because he's in another part of town than I am, pretty far from me, we did this by Skype, so I'm happy to do interviews by Skype. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next week.